Section 2 will briefly look at communication models and theories, and more specifically, how motivational interviewing can be used when working with children and young people growing up with HIV. When we're talking about child-centred communication, this is a communication that you develop as a practitioner or a professional, and you use throughout the journey the child has in the healthcare or support system. So this is from the naming of HIV through to transition and the mentoring adult services. Developing an interpersonal style is very important, and each individual can do this themselves. Reflective listening is an interpersonal skill which is both listening to the child or young person and then reflecting back to them what they've said. And by doing this, you're showing that you are listening and that you think what the child or young person says is important. Another good interpersonal style is that of expressing acceptance. Sometimes a child or young person may say something that you may morally or religiously not agree with, but it's important not to judge them and show them that you accept what they are saying is important to them and has meaning to them. Another interpersonal style is that of finding out and reinforcing the patient's own motivation for the reason why they have chosen to do something. And we will look at this in more detail in a minute with motivational interviewing. And finally, listed here on this slide, the final interpersonal style is that of affirming the patient's freedom of choice and self-direction. And this can be massively challenging. For example, if a young person comes to you and they have chosen not to take their HIV medicine, this is their choice. And rather than shouting at them and lecturing them, accepting the fact and showing them that you accept the fact this is their choice is a better way of supporting them to look at changing their own behaviour. And all of these interpersonal styles, this child-centred communication, needs to happen alongside structured education, advice, and youth-friendly information, so that the young person is being listened to, is being heard, but is also being given information and advice which they need in a manner that they will understand. So let's now briefly look at a cycle of change, which is the model of communication, motivational interviewing. And this is a complex theory, which I will only look at for a few minutes. And if you are interested, I urge you to go and find out more information about it. And we're going to look at motivational interviewing through a case study. And this case study is the case of Vika. And she is a young woman from Lviv. And this case was presented to us in 2013. At that time, she was aged 16 years of age. She was perinatally infected with HIV. She was not taking her ARVs and hadn't for at least a year. She was known to be sexually active and having unprotected sex. And she said she didn't care if her partners acquired HIV. She had a very fatalistic outlook. She said she was going to die soon anyway, so what was the point? So now let's look at how we could possibly support Vika through the model of motivational interviewing. So the first stage of motivational interviewing is probably the most difficult for the practitioner, because this is a pre-contemplation stage for the young person. So for Vika, this would be the point where she didn't want to change her behaviour. She wasn't interested. And so for the professional, at this point, the key aim is to keep her coming to her appointments. And when she attends the appointments, to keep building a relationship with her, to look at her wider life and talk to her about things that interested her that don't relate to HIV. And to get her to think about the future, to have aspirations, hopes and dreams. What does she want to be? Has she ever thought about having her own children? Just planting seeds all the time so that she gets to see that there is a future for her and therefore she becomes less fatalistic. And I do appreciate with cases like this, there are moral and legal implications in different countries. And we don't have the time to explore that here, but I am acknowledging it. So once we've travelled through the pre-contemplation stage, we see Vicar decides to contemplate change because she's become aware that there is a problem that exists, this problem being her not taking her HIV medicine, but she hasn't yet made a commitment to changing anything. And so within this, we think of her as owning the situation. So she's become a little bit less fatalistic. And through that, we move around the cycle of seeing how we can prepare her to then take action. And when you're preparing a child like Vicar, you need to look at the patterns and the triggers. So get her to consider why she stopped taking her ARV. Did anything particular happen? Has it happened before in the past? And explain to her that it is quite possible that it will happen again in the future. But each time, as long as she's learning and she's traveling around this cycle, then change will come. So you're preparing her for action, you're preparing her for maintenance, so taking her medicine, and you're also preparing her for relapse. The next stage is action. And within action, she needs a clear plan of what she wants to achieve and what will support her in doing this. And if we reflect back on those interpersonal skills, this is really important, where reflective listening comes in, where she makes the plan, she says what she wants to achieve, and she decides what will help her in doing this. And then we move around to maintenance. And maintenance is the hardest part. For a young woman who maybe hasn't ever really committed to taking ARV and who's had a complicated life and still has low self-esteem problems and still maybe doesn't necessarily see a future for herself. It may be a struggle to keep taking the medicine, but with support and ensuring that she knows that even if she isn't taking her medicine, to still come back and see you, that you will not judge her and you are there to support her in this journey, are all critical in her success. And then the final point we come to is relapse. And we don't call this failure, because this is just falling back into old patterns of behaviour. So this is not failure, and she will learn from the process, and you can support her in this learning. And what's interesting in this model of behaviour change is every single one of you listening today can probably think of a time when maybe you tried to give up smoking, to go to the gym, to stop eating cake, and you've probably followed this cycle. And so having that understanding and that insight personally will support you in them being able to support children and young people in their behavioural changes. And this is not paternalistic. It's not about shouting. It's not about telling someone what to do. It's about you being a team, a partnership, working towards the same goal. And all of these styles, these interpersonal skills, and these theories, they will help you to engage and involve the adolescent or the child in their healthcare. And what one adolescent specialist doctor once said to me was, we just need to get our young people through adolescence to adulthood with as little disruption to treatment as possible. That we acknowledge that adolescence is a time where young people with many different medical conditions won't take their medicine. But as long as we're supporting them and travelling along that path with them, we can hope that when they go into adulthood, they will change this behaviour.